Hi, everybody. Welcome to Connection Chat. I am your host, Christy Mann, and I'm here today. It's an honor to be here today with my new friend, Debbie Levison. She is an author and a publicist, and she has some really amazing stuff to bring to you guys today. We're looking at doing the long game on this one tonight. So if you're here just tuning in, buckle up. It's going to be fun. Debbie, why don't you take a couple minutes to tell us about you?
Sure, thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And this is all very exciting because we're all hooked up in the True Living Summit community, which is something I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, so I'm a new author. I have a debut book out, and it's this. Oops, that's the right way. The Crate, a story of war, a murder, and justice. And it's on audio too. Okay, that's my shame.
Oh, that's beautiful. I didn't even know that. Congratulations.
That's my shameless plug. That's my shameless plug for the books. Yeah, so my debut book, it's actually, it's been a lifelong dream for me to be an author. I've thought about writing a book. And if I tell you, from my very earliest memories of being a little kid in a library or a bookstore and wishing I had a book, because it was basically the only thing I could do. I knew I was never going to be an athlete. I couldn't do math for the life of me.
Oh my
And
God.
it was more like a matter of finding, okay, I can write. Yeah. No, really. I always wanted to be a storyteller, and I felt like I had a book in me. Wasn't sure what it was going to be, but I will tell you, I never thought it was going to be The Crate. Because The Crate is a true crime story of a really, really gruesome, grisly event that involved my family. And so I never expected to be writing something like that. And I'll just tell you very, very briefly that it all started in 2010 with a phone call from my brother. So I grew up in Canada and in Toronto, and in the mid-70s, my parents built a little cottage on a lake in a very beautiful region of Ontario called Muskoka, about 2.5 hours north of Toronto. And that cottage was where I spent every summer of my life growing up, from the day school ended till Labor Day. And then I, very reluctantly had to go back to the city.
Yeah.
But so it was at this cottage, my brother said he discovered a wooden crate that had been hidden underneath the crawl space of the cottage. And when the crate was opened, it just contained the most horrible thing that you could ever imagine. And it really, it was awful. And, like the immediate aftermath of the discovery, it really rocked my family, because here I was, I had 3 young kids that I wanted to shield from the horror of the whole thing. And my husband and I were totally freaked out. My brother became a murder suspect. And then the media came, and this became a big sensational story, and there were newspaper crews and television reporters and crews sort of descending on our little very private property, and the story was all over the headlines and in the news, and it felt like this giant sense of violation. And the worst part of it was that my parents, who were elderly at the time, it really traumatized them, because my parents had survived the Holocaust. And for them, the cottage was really their safe refuge. It was the place where they could forget about the terror of their past and everything they'd been through. And then this discovery dredged it all up again. So, and I kind of felt that, first of all, it took a while. I'm embarrassed to say that I was really very much caught up in how this affected my family, me and my family.
Right.
And it took a little while, like days, before I kind of started thinking, well, wait a minute, there's an actual victim in all of this. Like, there's a poor person, a woman who has died in the most awful way, and her family, must be absolutely grieving, and whatever they're feeling just completely overshadows what we're going through. And I started thinking, okay, I'm a writer. I've always been a writer. Um, Maybe I can give this victim a voice, because she didn't have a voice at that point.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to write the story. But also I felt, for readers to really understand how the crime impacted my family, I had to put it in the context of my Holocaust stories. And so the book became this intertwining of evil in the present and evil in the past. It's not a very happy book, but it's one that's really close to my heart. It tells my family's story. It tells the story of someone who's become very important in my life, although I've never met her. So yeah, so that's my backstory. And so The Crate came out in 2018, and it was life-changing to become a published author.
Did you have, when you published the book, did you have like your strategy for how it was going to go all laid out? And then looking back on it, how much of it actually went according to plan?
Oh yeah. And that's the embarrassing part of the story. I don't know how much you want to get into the nitty-gritty of how brutal the publishing industry can be. But when you think about it, there aren't that many industries that are really based on rejection. Like, maybe if you're an actress or an actor and you're constantly being rejected for parts, but what other career can you pursue where, like as not, it's more rejection than otherwise?
Than anything, yeah, absolutely. I have to agree with you there. I mean, it's a very, it is, and my friend Novel is here with us and encouraging us to get brutal. So let's dig into it. Yeah, it is one of the most difficult industries to keep going in. And for a person's ability to stand tall with that much, no, thank you. No, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to, if you don't already have one, you better develop a thick skin.
Yeah.
Definitely my downfall.
Reviewers are brutal. The platforms really don't help. You're aware of Amazon's. If you haven't bought from Amazon in the last 12 months, it's pulled. And I've had 42 reviews of books pulled down.
Yeah.
Because the purchase wasn't verified, or yeah, it's absolutely gut-wrenchingly brutal. How do you get through that and move forward?
You've got to be persistent. You've got to be, tenacious without being obnoxious. But you have to be, if this is the goal that you've set for yourself, depends how serious you are. Some people might get a couple of rejections and say, hey, this isn't for me, I'm moving on to something else. For me, well, I'll tell you later a different story, but with this book, I was determined to get it out there because I felt so strongly that it needed to be read. Right. Not only to tell the victim story, but as I said, it's a Holocaust story, and there are so many reasons to preserve Holocaust stories right now, not the least of which is Holocaust denial. And that was, a big part of why I wanted to get this story on paper, where I felt, okay, it's written, it's true. And I don't want anyone saying, none of this happened and where's the proof? Because my parents were the proof.
Right.
And also because I wanted it as a family legacy. You know, I wanted my children to know their family history,
Right.
and I wanted to give this gift of writing it down to my parents because they, you know, my mom was freaking out. I think she still is, like 2 years later, that her story is actually in a book, and that's kind of a gift.
Yeah, it's great. One of my it's coming soon again. I published a book a while back. My first horror series. I write dark fiction, so welcome to the club. I think The Crate definitely falls into the category of dark fiction, because it's not.
Nonfiction.
Oh,
Nonfiction.
it's what?
It's nonfiction.
It's
It's
still
dark.
dark fiction.
Dark nonfiction.
So it's dark nonfiction.
Right.
That's an important note, and it's interesting because I've been trying to figure out how to take my horror stories and move into a nonfiction area. You're coming through. You know, we encounter a lot of rejection. We encounter a lot of no's, but we also have our own demons that we fight, and the arguments that we have within ourselves over, well, you can't do that. I'm a very watch me, hold my beer kind of individual. I mean, when things started happening and a lot of publishing snags were getting hit, and I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do with my book, I got pretty upset. I got really frustrated. I got angry, and I went, all right, well, I can't do that with you. Watch me do it. And that was how my publishing company, My Small Press, came to be. Was there were things that I wasn't allowed to do with my books that I wanted to do, like create merchandise and you know, promote courses and all of these things. And I was like, well, yeah, I can. Watch me. And so now here I am. I've overcome so much in the process, but man, there are days that you're just like, I can't do this. I can't keep doing this. I can't. And you just get up the next day and you're like, well, we're going for it again.
Yeah.
And you go.
What
So
a great attitude. That is a really, really great attitude.
tomorrow's always another day.
Yeah.
So it's what gets me through from day to day. And I'm happy and pleased and excited to talk with people about it, especially people that understand, because there are so many that don't.
Well, I think if you haven't actually gone through the process or something like it, it's very hard to, and it's also really hard for people to understand the changes in the industry because the publishing industry today is not what it was 5 or 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago. That was one of my big, light bulb moments when I was sort of embroiled in the whole process. And, people are just kind of learning that. So if you don't,
We've been
understand.
We've been fortunate over the last 4 years to you published in 2018. I believe that was the year that Barnes and Noble actually decided that they were going to accept self-published books. That was not a possibility with Barnes and Noble prior to that. And I got started in 2016. So I had 2 years of, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well now you can publish yourself. They'll distribute self-published books through expanded distribution and through Ingram Spark. When Ingram Spark opened up that avenue, boy, howdy, that became like my. Yeah. And now I'm not even direct with KDP and Amazon anymore. It's distributed to them through Ingram Spark. And I don't have to deal with any of the stuff that made me want to publish around them in the first place. So the people that are like, oh, well, it's not anything if it's not on Amazon. Well, there you go. It's on Amazon. For those guys.
I'll tell you, so that is one of the upsides of having a traditional publisher, to be able to skirt all those headaches And honestly, if I hadn't had my book published, I would have self-published it at some point. I mean, I knew that would be an option. It's just, I felt for me, it was a little daunting because there was that whole tech part of it that I thought was just going to be so hard to navigate.
It is.
God.
It is. You weren't wrong. You were not wrong.
Yeah.
And it made it important for me with the press. I knew there were people that wanted to get their book out there, but they'd come up with the understanding and the belief that you aren't anybody if you aren't traditionally published. If you don't have somebody else that brings you that credibility of they took the time to read it, they thought it was good enough for them to polish it and put their name on it, then I mean, and there was a big thing going on when I did it, and man, I fought. I was like, I don't want to create a publishing company. I don't want to. But it was literally, I stopped at the I don't want to. You don't want to publish other people's books? Really? You don't want to do that? And I was like, no, I really do want to do that. So it just kind of all played out.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was more important to be able to help other people get where they were. I'd achieved my life goals. My books are available on Barnes and Noble, and that was 13 years old, standing in line in the checkout line at Barnes and Noble with Stephen King's It in my hand, going, well, wouldn't this be cool?
Right.
To have somebody standing here in this line with their book, with my book in their hand.
Absolutely. That was the dream.
That was 25 years ago. It took a long time to get there, but now I'm there. I have people that are, my book is selling at Barnes and Noble. It's not on brick and mortar shelves, but that's not as important or relevant now. Back in the day, it was the only way.
It was the only thing. Yeah.
So I'm
especially
grateful
at Barnes and Noble now because of the pandemic. So things change day to day.
Day to day, and it's been great, and it's been quite a ride. I will definitely say it has been quite a ride, and so now it's just getting to the point where now my focus is get my books put back out over time so that they're selling for me, and I'm making a living doing this. But at the same time, it's more important for me to be able to do stuff like this, where we're sitting down and having conversations that can be used to educate people coming in.
Right.
Because they have no idea that this information is not talked about publicly. It just isn't. Nobody goes and says, hey, here's a list of things that you want to do before you hit publish on that book. Because if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for having to promote the book plus figure all this out. Do it in line. We get so rushed and so, what's the word? Excited about getting the book out there that we let all of the rest fall to the side.
Right.
And it's really that there's a system that needs to be worked from beginning through the publication process and beyond. And without that momentum, if you're starting after you hit the publish button, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's
I had an editor who gave me a really good piece of advice way back at the very beginning when I first started writing this manuscript. She said, you have to build the house before you can decorate the rooms. And, there's so much wisdom in that
statement. Yeah. Wow.
All that prep and all the hard work that comes with, with really creating a polished product, a product that has value to it and isn't just, kind of some rooms that are somehow decorated and slapped together. And the whole, everything is about offering value to the reader. So there's a lot to think about for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll tell you just, that made me remember something else too. And I'll just tell you a secret that you were talking about misconceptions of the industry. And I'll tell you, back in, I guess, the 90s, where I had an initial start to this process before the crate came along, I kind of grew up on Judith Krantz books. She was like my idol as an author way back in the 80s. And I had this totally glamorous notion of publishing and Fifth Avenue. And I had these images of having lunches with my editor at the Plaza Hotel. And so just
Yeah. Well, speaking of bringing value, let's jump into the questions for this so we get the connection chat part of this out of the way. And then we can jump into the fun stuff, the stuff I'm really excited. I mean, I'm excited about talking about this, but there's some conversation that we're about to have that's going to be really, really powerful and life-changing for people, I think. So I'm excited to get to that. But question number one,
okay.
What was the best for you connection you ever made, and how did it make a difference for you?
So, I mean, there have been a lot of people who have helped along the way. I'll mention two just with regard to this book. The first was an editor who I initially signed with, an acquiring editor at a publishing house in New York, and that's where all the fantasies of lunches at the Plaza came into play. But this editor, he went through my book and gave me some really solid advice about how to approach the story. And I ended up cutting 100 pages out of the script on his advice, and he was absolutely right. It made it a better book. But more recently, pardon?
There was that gut punch when you got when that came through, though, wasn't there?
It was, but he was right. He was right. And then more recently, though, I would have to say that Gary Krebs, who I know you've spoken with, Gary is publishing, should I say legend? He's been in the publishing industry for a long time, in a number of different capacities. He's been in the audio world. He's been in the Amazon world, and now he does all kinds of things from book packaging to agenting and so on, ghostwriting.
Powerhouse.
So Gary, I actually knew Gary socially, not very well. I knew him a little bit socially when I was already under contract with the Crates. And as I mentioned, things can be brutal in publishing. Well, that contract fell through a year after I signed it. So literally on the 364th day of this valid contract, the publishers in New York backed out of the contract, decided they weren't going to publish the book after all. And I mean, you can imagine I was pretty heartbroken. That was after, months and months of editing and planning and working on everything. So I had to start again. I had to get I had an agent at that time, but we parted ways, and I had to get a new agent, publisher, start, basically it was a year of my life wasted. And it was really especially disappointing because my parents, they were already in their 80s when I was going through this process. And I really wanted them to be there through the whole journey because it was their stories that I wanted them to be there for the book to come out. So I had a meeting with Gary, and it ended up his offer to agent me, to represent me. And he was able to get the book in front of a new publisher, and I signed with them. And just a few months later, the book came out. It had already been so heavily edited that it wasn't really much for them to do at that point.
Right.
And so they put the book out fast. And I can only thank Gary for making that process so smooth. And that is, one good thing about not self-publishing, that you have someone like a Gary in your court who can do a lot of the nitty-gritty of the contract and the legalities, and even a lot of the going between the author and the publisher. Because it's hard for an author not only to know how to communicate with a publisher, but to know how often to communicate. And, the last thing you want to do is just keep pestering them with lots of little issues. So it was really nice to have someone doing that on my behalf. And then not only did Gary help me tremendously with the book and with all the associated issues to do with launching a book, but he also put me in touch with someone who is actually now my most important client in publicity. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm super grateful for that because that's been an ongoing relationship and something I hope continues into the future. And then on top of that, he also put me in touch with the whole True Living community. So I'm
Great
thrilled
group.
to be, yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm
you'll probably see them trickling into the comments here shortly. Tony's doing a great job of tagging them. So
oh, okay. Well, anyway, I'm was going to say I'm just honored to be on 3 different panels for that summit, which is March now, 20th and 21st.
it is 20th and 21st. Yes.
And so not only am I going to be participating in that, which I'm really happy about, but Gary has put me in touch with all these incredible people like Tony Doty, Tony Dreammaker Doty, who is
Yeah.
fantastic.
He's
And
brilliant. He's just
is a wealth of connections and ideas, and he's so generous. I don't think I've ever met anyone so generous with being willing to help and to share what he has. So again, I'm really grateful for that. And then Mike Peluso, who's this like ball of energy and creativity and just so much fun to work with and just to listen to him. Like
just to listen to him. Yeah.
like when I'm watching Zooms, I'm like, oh, and I just get all excited because he's an exciting person himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Clarissa Burt, like, and like all of these great introductions. So, it all kind of harkens back to Gary Krebs, and if he's watching,
Yeah. Having Gary on the show was like, that was like next level for me. He was somebody that I was like, or when I found out about, the event coming up and I kind of fought my way into, helping bring it to fruition. Gary and Rick were literally like the people that I wanted to connect with. They were the people that for me, being an author as long as I had and being in the publishing world, coming up on the 5-year mark, you figure out really quickly that it's not about the author, it's about the people who make them and help them get out into the world, especially when the author is starting from scratch. I mean, we have to there's a lot to figure out and a lot to piece together. And if you don't have the connections to the right people that not just take you to the next level, but help you put those pieces together. So when you show up, you're presenting an entire package that people can go, oh, yeah, we want that. Yeah, bring that to us. So being able to connect with them and learn from, even from the sidelines, even from like a further away view, being able to watch them work, watch them do their interviews, talk with them, be on the videos where the whole planning committee for the summit has gotten together and they're just throwing ideas out and they're like, no, that's not going to work. Yes, we're going to do this. I mean, it's powerful. It really is powerful to be able to watch that and to be a part of it. It sparks so many things outside of that. So I'm eternally grateful that Anthony brought me into True Living and that I stayed. There were some moments that I was like, I don't know if this is for me, but the people that are there are genuine. They really want to help people grow and hit that success point. And they're really there to help kind of mold and shape that into what you want it to look like. Because when you first show up, you're just kind of like, okay, well, I want this. Okay, well, what's getting there look like? I don't know. I have no idea. Well, now we do. So it's been awe-inspiring for me, and I get really excited when I start talking about it. So I apologize for that. let's move into the question that excites me the most, because these are the stories that turn the tide. What's the one connection that got away, and how did it?
Oh, the connection that got away.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to the 90s. So, as I mentioned, I always wanted to be an author. Really, I felt like I could write a book. Professionally, I had always been a writer and a publicist. So, my days were, hours of writing anyway, but never in book form. And then in the mid 90s, when I had my first child and I was home on maternity leave from my job as public relations director, I thought, okay, I'm home. I'm going to write a book while she takes a nap. And I did. I actually did. I wrote a book, like 120,000 word romance. And she was a really good sleeper.
Wow. Yeah, I would say so. Wow.
But it really did flow. Like once I started writing, it just poured out this story. And before I knew it, and we're talking about the 90s, an old-fashioned desktop computer with a giant thick monitor and printing it out on those reams of paper that all come out in one long ribbon with the perforations down the sides. So, I'm ripping apart 120,000 word manuscript to get it. Anyway, so I send off the manuscript to some big New York City publishers, not knowing what to expect and having absolutely no idea of how competitive this world is. When you're sending in a manuscript cold, it just ends up on a slush pile with a million other manuscripts. To my incredible surprise, I get back a letter from one of the big five. And the editor says, I picked up your manuscript from the slush pile, and you're such a great writer, and you have such a knack for whatever dialogue and narrative and etc. And I showed it around the office and blah, blah, blah. This is all in the letter. And she says, I hope you haven't been snatched up by another publisher. So this is all great news, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
She says, you'd have to make, she goes, in the letter, you'd have to make, these changes. And she writes a few changes, some revisions I would have to make. And she said, we'd be happy to take another look if you make those changes, right? This is the dream letter. What do? Nothing. I put the manuscript on a shelf. I have another baby. I moved from Canada, where I was living, to the United States. So, okay, that's a big life change. So maybe you can give me a pass on that part of it.
Absolutely.
But here's the manuscript collecting dust. Do I ever do the work and make the changes and resubmit it? No. So, okay, so maybe I get a pass for a little bit of the transitions and the babies and the new job and the new life and all of that. But I'm pretty sure there was like quite a self-sabotage element in there too, that I just, and of course, looking back, what an opportunity that was to have been published 20 years ago, as opposed to, waiting until I'm an old lady now. And I could have started my career as a novelist that much sooner and, maybe even had a little success. So who knows? Who knows where that could have led?
Do you think back on it often?
Totally. I shot myself in the foot with that one.
I like that you use that term. I use it a lot. I've shot myself in the foot with several things and several opportunities, and it's man, that not taking the step. And I'm sure at the time you were just like, I have all this stuff going on, and there's so much change, and you're like, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. Okay, I'll do it tomorrow, and then something comes up, and you're just like,
yeah,
and then the opportunity is, the next thing you know, it's months, weeks, years later, and you're like,
years and years. And I actually got back in touch with that editor, not for this current book, but because I had the idea, okay, well, wait, I still have this manuscript sitting around, and I've done all the work and it's gotten good feedback. Maybe I can resurrect it. But truthfully, it was so dated, and not just, that I had people on the phone twirling the phone cord and stuff while they were talking, like not that kind of dated, even
because
though.
that was your thing back in the day. Yeah.
So not only that, but even the tone of the language, like my writing has changed so much since then, but so has the tone of books that people want to read these days. That it's become stale. Like
Right.
the voice of the book is stale. So there's not really much I could do with it at this point.
Right.
It would be a total rewrite. So maybe
Put it together as a collection of pieces that never were.
an antique, yes. I'll have an antique.
That might sell. I actually we had family and friends that were over at the house a lot when my kids were younger. They're all in their 20s now. But when they were younger, they would come over, their friends and everybody would come over, and I just sit and watch and listen to their conversations. And every once in a while somebody would say something that just would be like, all right then. And so I decided that I was going to make a coffee table book called Dinosaurs Taste Like Metal. And it was just going to be a collection of all of these little quotes and quips from people that passed through my home over the years. When I decided to publish my first book, I ran into a situation where, like yours, 2 weeks before I had my release day scheduled, my editor came back and goes, "Hey, I just had a chance to read through the rest of it. It's not ready. You're going to have to pull everything." I'd done interviews. I had done so much promo work for this book, promoting the release day of July 15th, 2016. For 2 weeks before, my editor to come to me and go, "Yeah, it's not going to fly. You're going to have to fix it." And then send me a spreadsheet where we were cutting 35,000 words on a 57,000 word manuscript. And it wasn't because it wasn't bad. It needed to be rearranged. And there were bits and pieces of it that it created a plot hole that I hadn't read all the way through, and she caught it, and it was a big mess. And so I was like, okay, you're absolutely right, but God, this sucks. And so I started thinking, because I'm like, okay, if I don't get something published, I'm going to quit. I'm going to walk away from this, and I don't want to do that. So I went digging through my archives of other stories that I had written and found a flash fiction piece. And I pulled it out and I polished, I fluffed it up a little bit. I got it. It was 350 words, and I fluffed it up to 5,000. Just
that's a lot.
Polished it out and sent it to my editor. And she was like, "Hey, this is good. Changed the ending up a little bit because you kind of threw me a little bit." And I was like, "Well, I'm all right. I'll yeah, but it's going to stay. It's going to stay a cliffhanger because there was more to it." And so we kind of went back and forth with that. But then I hit publish on that short story and was like, "Look, I don't care if it sells, doesn't sell, but I'm going to use this one to learn everything there is about the whole process of going from written to cover design to editing to the whole nine, and then the promotion side on the other end of it with this one book." Because when I go to release my debut novel, I don't want any hiccups. And if I do run into hiccups, I want to know how to handle them so I can stay on track, because that for me was a really big deal. The idea of having to explain to people that it's not going to be released and you've already pre-ordered it, and I am sincerely sorry, and having to refund money, God, that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. So it just lit the fire under me to do this little short book that's grown to 6. It's a series of 6 books, and there are 12 more planned.
Wow. That's
But it got so much good reception that it was weird to me how this one little short story, I learned so much. And then when my debut novel came out, there were glitches, there were hiccups, but I made my release day. The story was completely different from where it was when I first submitted it to my editor, and it was great. It really is a strong and empowering story, even though it's dark and gritty. There's that balance. You're like, okay, it's dark and gritty. Are people going to read it, and is it going to be? But it's become very empowering for people that have read it. And so it's been, for me, it was really important to get that knowledge with the smaller book without the expectation of this is going to go wild. So I don't even remember where I was going with that. I'm sorry. It was just, you had said something that sparked that whole story with the editor cutting, and when you're willing to do that and make it the book it's supposed to be, the book that's going to do well, you do it. You really don't have a lot of choice in the matter. If an editor comes to you and says, hey, this isn't going to fly, you need to make these changes, you kind of have to do it or accept where the book lands. So, well, after the connection that got away, let's go ahead and move into your one bit of advice and then kick it into the hyperdrive. If you're still on.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So question number 3 is what is your one piece of advice? Most specifically for the people who are planning on attending the Journey to Success Summit. Well, let's kind of take it out a little bit further from that and apply it to making connections in general with people that will help move your business and your life forward.
Okay, so making connections. So the way I see life, here's my big philosophy. Everything is an opportunity. Every activity is an opportunity. And I've kind of learned this, during the process of, I see your little banner scrolling. That looks so dumb. Everything's an opportunity. Can't you think of something better than that? Okay.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah. Let me explain. Maybe there's something a little more intelligent behind that. In terms of everywhere you go is a potential opportunity for a connection. So, like, I can't even describe how many times I've been at the supermarket in my schleppiest, most ripped up sweatpants and sweatshirt, and I bump into someone that, could have been someone that I would have approached and started up a conversation with, and then I was like, oh, can't do it like this. It's not professional. No, but really, you have to think of every potential scenario that you're in as an opportunity. So, for instance, if I'm invited to do a library talk, and it's a storm, and this has happened to me many times, so I'm talking from experience. Big storm, turns out there are only 5 people coming after all, out of what it was supposed to be. And the librarian or the program coordinator calls me and says, hey, listen, if you want to cancel, that's fine. You know what? I never cancel. I will do my entire presentation with, all my audio visuals and my whole big setup of materials. I'll do the whole thing for 2 people or 200 people, because you never know who's in the audience. One of those 2 people could very well be a connection that will serve you in the future. And it's happened to me so many times where, out of this little group of people, somebody comes up to me and says, I love what you said, and would you be willing to do the same sort of presentation for my organization that I'm part of? And suddenly I've gone from an audience of 5 to an audience of 100. And again, like, I have author friends who started doing radio interviews, and I think there's a lot of merit behind radio interviews for the same reason. So she says, you know, I started doing radio interviews and then I stopped because it's not worth it. Nobody listens. What, you have 1 or 2 or 10 people listening? And my feeling is, okay, that's true. Maybe you only have 10 people listening, but what if those 10 people include a Hollywood producer or
Tony Doty.
executive director? Yeah. What if Tony Doty's listening? You want to forfeit that opportunity? So no, really, I think you never know who you're going to meet, and you always need to be prepared to make that one incredible connection. And by prepared, you know, I've learned to always carry a stack of books in my car and always carry a bunch of business cards in my purse wherever I am, and have that kind of professional preparedness, because you don't want to be caught in the middle of making what could be a great connection and then not be ready for it.
Right, right, right. What if Tony Doty is listening?
That's better.
I'm gonna put it, and then I'm gonna put in this one.
I also think, right.
Does that work?
That works.
That works.
Better than the first one.
But opportunity is everywhere. That's something that I've been trying to talk to people about. And my book coming out in March is called Reputation is Everything for Writers. So we're going to segue into the publicity side of Debbie at this point. So with that being said, I'm writing the book because I've noticed that a lot of people they really aren't aware of how everything is that opportunity. And so how do you recommend people become aware and more mindful of what their reputation is, and where does it really matter most from your professional opinion?
Okay, well, I will tell you what I told an author, a first-time author who reached out to me via Facebook, asking for a little bit of advice. And she said, I have a very limited budget. You know, what do you think I should spend it on? And so I gave her a list. I gave her a list of things. So much of what you can do to build your reputation, to build your brand, to make connections, so much of that is free. I mean, the possibilities are endless. But at the same time, there are a few things that I would make sure to invest in for an author. And
where's get my notebook and my pen. Go ahead, I'm listening.
Okay, so I would say the first thing would be the book launch, because that is a really great opportunity to hit your entire community of colleagues, family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, you know, everyone you know, bring them together in a space and get the word of your book out there. Maybe not everyone is going to buy a copy. You hope that they will, because it's your book launch and you're probably feeding them and maybe paying for the venue or whatever else you're investing in that party. But it really is a chance to make one big splash, and especially, you know, to count on those people to give you reviews, because reviews are so hard to come by just from, you know, from the general readership of your book. I find myself really begging and pleading for every review that I get. So yeah, so the book launch is a really great opportunity, and you know what, I love a good party, so it's a really good chance to start with a splash. The other thing that I really can't stress enough for authors is to have really good marketing materials. So I've been on panels and I've been at all kinds of conferences or festivals or author fairs, whatever, where I come, you know, with all my boxes my suitcase is full of materials and have this beautiful display, with a tablecloth and professional materials. And the person right beside me has not thought about doing any of that. And they have like their pile of 3 books on a bare table, and they have a pen, and they've written their name on a piece of paper, and that's it. And it's really embarrassing for them because they're not professional and they're not prepared. And, to be in a situation where people are looking at you as an author, there's a certain expectation of professionalism. And that, I think, is true. Doesn't matter what your genre is. I mean, you can be writing a Jack Canfield type book,
Right.
a little fantasy of fiction. It doesn't matter. But readers come to you with an expectation that you're a professional. And so you need to go out into the public as a professional. So business cards for sure, or postcards or bookmarks, whatever. I don't think it's really necessary to invest in a lot of the little gimmicky giveaways.
Right.
They're expensive and people grab them and go. But it's nice to do a little colorful touch. Like I put out candy usually and let people grab it. And if they're not going to buy a book and they want candy, that's fine. But book stands and foam boards. I now have a couple of framed storyboards that I put on tripods, and I carry the tripods with me because you can't count on people having all the materials that you're going to need.
Right.
Presentation. So tablecloth, good signing pen, all that stuff. All that stuff is just a matter of being prepared.
You're
And
better.
here's another thing that I wasn't always prepared with. You need to have a system for accepting credit cards, debit cards and credit cards, because I've been in so many situations where somebody said, "Oh, you have a book in your car? Let me buy it from you." And, "Oh, I don't have any cash. Can you take a credit card?" This was right at the beginning, where I'm like, no. So I missed the sale. Now I carry, my little handy square wherever I go.
Square. It's in my purse.
You never know. I've sold books in parking lots of the local grocery store. Why miss an opportunity?
Why miss an opportunity? I love that. I love that. Do you have a number 3?
What was number 1? Okay, so the marketing, I kind of thought the book launch was 1, the marketing materials were 2, and then the payment method was not marketing. I'll tell you more about publicity because, so I mentioned that a lot of this stuff is free, right? So do you want me to give viewers some suggestions for how to get free publicity?
Yes, please.
Okay. So every book has a theme, whether or not you're aware of it. Obviously, some are more glaring. So, I have clients who have written business books, for instance. And so the natural connection for them is to do events where business or finance or what have you is the focus of the event. You may not know what your theme is if you're writing a fiction, but I'll give you an example. I have a friend, a very well-known author, who wrote a series of books where the main character has diabetes. And as soon as I read that book, I knew, and helped her with it, that she could be, and I hate to use the word exploiting, but that's a natural connection. To find audiences who are receptive to that part of the book. So as a result, she's been written up in the National Diabetes Association newsletter because her book is, it's very empowering for people who are diabetic to read about this very strong main character who, goes out and saves the world despite having this illness. So that's like a huge platform for her. For me, for the crate, I talk about domestic violence That's one of the themes. And obviously, I talk about the Holocaust. So that has been a lot of the communication that I do for the book and a lot of my platform as well. Um, but the other thing is, are you doing everything you can be doing on social media? So that's obviously free. You need to have your Amazon author central, your Amazon author profile, your Goodreads profile. You need to be on Facebook and have an author page, as well as your personal profile. You need to be on Instagram. LinkedIn is tremendous, and I personally don't mind LinkedIn as much as I should, but I know it has a ton of potential.
Right.
So social media for sure is one fantastic way to promote yourself. Reviews, I mentioned. Getting reader reviews and getting professional reviews also. Doesn't cost anything. It takes a lot of time and effort. And I'll tell you a secret about that too. You don't have to reinvent the wheel when you're trying to get professional reviews. You find people who have written successfully in your genre, and you see who has reviewed them. And then you approach those outlets and those reviewers and say, hey, I know you're interested in, and say your genre is self-help. And you find an author who's written a self-help book that really overlaps with yours, or there's some commonality in the themes, whatever. And that person has 10 different reviews from, whatever newspapers or bloggers. You approach them and you say, hey, I know you're interested in this topic. Would you be interested in taking a look at my work? And it works. It works. It does. It does. Okay, then you get to be creative. And this part is what I love the most. But say you've written a children's book. Naturally, you're going to hit every children's museum in your area and say, listen, I have this book. Can I set up a table on a Sunday afternoon and sell it? Or can we do an event that somehow feeds off of the ideas in my book? If you've written a book about dinosaurs, like you said, it's so easy and so natural to approach venues that have some sort of a dinosaur connection. It doesn't cost them anything. It brings people in, gives you free publicity, because chances are the venue will do a little bit of publicity on your behalf before an event. You set up a table, that's free for them, and you're drawing in people from the street. So it's a win-win. It's a win for the author and a win for the venue. I have done things at cafes. I call them my coffee and crime series, where I set up a table in a cafe, and people are coming in and out, and they stop and they look, and I talk and sell a few books. And what else? Clearly, you want to be part of panels and conferences and festivals and whatever, agricultural fairs where they have a tent with your state, or the possibilities are really endless. I'm rambling. I'm totally
it's all really good
stuff and have met lots of other authors along the way doing similar kinds of things. I'm also a big fan, by the way, of joint ventures with other authors, with hooking up with another author who doesn't necessarily have to write exactly what you write. It could be, the two of you are from the same town and you decide to do an event together. If you do have a similar platform, it just gives you that much more reason to reach out to a venue and say, hey, we're two authors of books that are about this, and do you want to do an event? And I can't tell you how easy it is to do things like that. It just takes time. It takes time. Sorry?
With COVID, is that something that you're still able to do?
Okay, so clearly all the in-person events are on hold until the pandemic is over. But Zoom is free. Zoom is also a fantastic way to get in front of people, and it takes a lot of planning. And especially now, if you want to get into a library, for instance, and do one of their Zoom presentations, you just have to book in advance, because they're preparing all of these different programs months ahead of time. So it takes a lot of preparation, a lot of emailing and persistence, but it's doable for sure.
So, big question for you, since it's totally doable, for somebody who doesn't have the time but has some money to spend, what route would you recommend they go?
Well, if you've got money to spend and you can do it yourself, I guess if you really looked hard, you could find a publicist. No, of course.
Really looked hard. Here, let me look really, really hard right here. I have it. Hang on. Oh, where is it? There.
Yeah, no, for sure. A publicist will obviously take the burden off the author and do a lot of this. As we were talking before the show started, that there are so many authors that are coming into this as first-time authors and have this real misconception about what their publisher will be doing for them.
Right.
And the answer is very little. The publisher will do very little in the way of marketing.
Thank you. Thank you. That's
nothing personal. And unless you're Lee Child, chances are they expect you to do the marketing yourself and to do the promotion and do the work of the promotion. And, somebody said to me when I was first starting to write, they said, writing the book is the fun part. Marketing the book is the hard work. And that is so true.
It's so absolutely true. And as much as I would love to be able to do more of it for my publishing clients through my press, it's not cost effective, and it's not feasible for a publishing company to be able to do that for the number of books that they're looking to publish.
Of course.
Have you found publishers that meet up with or have a publicist on staff?
Sure. I've been to amazing book launches where the big publishing house has actually sent a team of publicists to coordinate the whole event and to greet the people and set up a table of wine and goodies. Yeah, I've been to some of those, but those are few and far between. And those are almost never for a debut author either. They're for an established author, someone who's had a little bit of experience and has already made the publishing house some money.
So, go on.
Here's all yours.
So for someone who is at the stage where they're beginning to query publishers about their book, what would you recommend they stop and consider before sending out a letter to a publisher? What should their outcome be? What should their actual goal be with a publisher versus with a publicist, so we can kind of guide them and help them understand which route is going to be more beneficial for them. I don't want to lose clients, but at the same time, knowing that I'm not going to be able to do for them what they're wanting to have done, what would you be looking for in the way of a client so I know to recommend them to you?
So what you said about defining your goals, so that's a huge thing. I really think that people need to be going into this with a really good idea of what their end goal is in terms of writing a book. So for me, I wanted to be an author, full stop. That was my goal. I wanted to write a book, be an author, have that kind of, okay. have that as my goal. But I know a lot of other people who use the book as a tool to reach a further goal. So, for instance, I have a friend who's written a book in the healthcare genre. She wrote a memoir about her family's journey through their son's illness. And she published a book, but she uses that book as her platform to then go on and get speaking engagements and be able to lobby the government in the healthcare sector, and has really made a name for herself. In fact, she is part of the FDA. She's a consumer representative. So, it really depends if you're thinking of your book as a step along the way, or if your end game is to be published. For me, I wanted, at some point, I wanted the credibility of having a traditional publisher's name on the book as opposed to, Amazon Digital Services.
Right.
And will I do that again in the future? I mean, I don't know, because again, things are changing so much. And I'm constantly hearing that Amazon sales are really the only ones that matter. And now here we are in a pandemic when brick and mortar bookstores are not necessarily either going to be there in the future or be helpful in the future. So, but what you said is absolutely true about knowing what your goals are.
So when they know, and they know that publicity is what they're looking for, because really self-publishing isn't, I mean, I have a service where I provide, like, if you run into tech support, I guess would be the best way to explain it. Outside of my publishing company, I provide a publishing service, because you'll run into glitches, you'll run into hiccups, you'll run into situations where, you're doing everything you can, and for some reason, Amazon just keeps kicking you back that your cover isn't right. And so you're going through this whole process, and I can help with the formatting, getting it formatted specifically for Amazon, knowing exactly what they're looking for, and getting it so that the book goes live the first time you put it out. It's a great service for those who want to stay self-published.
Mm-hmm.
But if, like, a couple of my friends have spent months, and they're like, okay, I'm tired. I've been at this for months. Can you help me do this? Yeah, sure. And then 72 hours later, their book is alive and they're off and running. I like being able to do that for them. But then I've also had people who have come to me and been like, can you help me promote? Can you help me market? Can you help me with this side of things? And I have to tell them, I can only do so much. Have you noticed the sudden switch? You've been at this almost about as long as I have. Did you notice a change in the industry with social media, where it went all of a sudden, for a long time there, you were able to promote, create your business and promote your business all over Facebook? Did you notice the shift where it went from the ability to do that for free to having to pay for it to happen?
Yeah.
That gets expensive. It gets really ridiculously pricey when, somebody like me who's got 4 books that are live, trying to pay to promote each and every one of them, that where like weekly, I have to pick and choose which one I can afford, which one I want to do the most with this week, because it's what I can afford. And then the difference between, when I went in, it was, well, I'll start running ads, and then as the money from the sales from the book start coming in, I'll just keep the ad running. Then you realize it's 60 to 90 days of payouts from royalties when you're going through the different platforms. It doesn't exactly work out that way. So how do you recommend how would you recommend a client get around that?
So first of all, I will say I am not an expert in social media advertising. There are publicists who are very good at that and very knowledgeable, and I'm not. So I'm much more traditional in my approach, and I send out news releases and I write columns and articles that get the author's name into the press. I arrange interviews and get people onto radio, television, podcasts, newspapers. I write op-eds. And the people, people have to understand going into this, it's not going to be a matter of their names splashed in big letters in the New York Times. It's going to be an op-ed in whatever target publication it is, and their name is only going to figure into it at the bottom in the boilerplate, in very small letters at the bottom. But it's all of these pieces of doing all of these little things that together build a brand. And the brand is the author and the book, and it's the platform. So, there are a lot of different approaches. And if your folks are interested just in the social media part of it, I'm not the right person.
But the radio station, the TV, the things outside of you do the press releases, you do
all that.
The scheduling interviews and
I do the old lady stuff.
the old help me out here with the old lady stuff, because
I'm traditional. I'm behind the times. I do all that kind of traditional media work.
The actual radio stations and television and Good Morning America and
all that
places. Yeah. Now, is it hard to get those
bloggers too?
Bloggers too,
and podcasts. Podcasts are this whole new world of publicity, and people are looking for content. So again, it depends how much time you have to do it yourself. It depends how much money you have to pay somebody else. It can all be done. It just takes a lot of persistence and doggedness and just some innovative thinking.
Debbie, it has been an absolute blast being here with you today. And the value that just that last part, that last half of the chat brought on top of the beginning of it. It's big stuff. This is what I'm excited to be bringing to the table, and I'm happy that you're a part of the Journey to Success Summit, the True Living Networks Summit that is coming up, because this is what people are going to be getting, this kind of stuff right here. And then, you're putting it out there. People can now reach you. Your website, debbielevison.com, is where they could reach out to you if they wanted to do the publicity end of things.
Yeah.
And am I free to recommend and refer people to you when they come to me, and we kind of adjust and understand better what their goals are, and they're looking for a publicist over a publisher?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely awesome. Guys, right here, right now, access to a publicist, somebody who can help you take your book out into the world and really make it become what you want it to be, and have the success and what that looks like for you. Feel free to reach out to me. I can connect you with Debbie, or reach out to Debbie yourself via her website there. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and man, the turnout in the comments today. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this with us. Looking forward to doing this again. Debbie, thank you for being willing to go over the original, 2 time and talking about the publicity side of things with me. I'm truly grateful for that. So thank you, everybody. It was great having everybody here. We'll see you tomorrow. I believe we're going to try and get Trey Rembert on with us. I'm looking forward to that show as well. Debbie, welcome to come back. Hit me up if you ever want to do this again, or you have something else, any tidbits you want to share. I'm absolutely open to doing this again. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you, Christy.
Absolutely. Good night, guys.
Bye-bye.